Finally, a horror film that'll be scarier to watch at home than in the theater. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my coverage of the 2026 Sundance Film Festival, today I'm going to be talking about the 2025 supernatural horror film, Undertone. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and recommendations. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and even some tailored film recommendations. So be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Undertone stars Nina Kiri, Adam DiMarco, and Michèle Duque, and is the directorial debut by Ian Tuason. It tells the story of a paranormal podcast host who finds her podcast investigation and real life beginning to paranormally bleed into one another after being sent a series of disturbing audio files. People seem to forget this, especially in today's era of online hyperbole and opinion-based outrage, but horror is subjective. Ghosts, clowns, serial killers, demons, each scare somebody and each do absolutely nothing for somebody else. Likewise, different subgenres and even presentation styles of horror films can have the same polarizing result. What terrifies one person might have no effect on the next person. So, it's always important to take marketing hyperbole with a grain of salt each time you hear a new horror film being touted as the scariest movie of the year. Regardless of exactly what scares you, though, there's a very good chance that it's going to be sensory. You'll feel fear as an emotion, but it'll come to you through your tangible senses. Maybe you'll see something horrifying, or hear something unsettling. Maybe your skin will crawl, or you'll feel your hair stand up on end. Hell, maybe even a scent or taste is tied to something that scares you. Fear is a visceral reaction caused by sensory input, and it's totally possible that Undertone won't have just the right combination of inputs to instill fear in you, but there's no denying that this is a sensory horror experience. Sound is often a supremely important component of horror films. I would argue that most still tend to prioritize the visuals, usually using sound as a way to enhance the atmosphere or even startle the audience during jump scares. But it can go a long way towards making a film scary. I mean, just try watching a horror film on mute and see how effective, or ineffective, it is. Undertone is a movie that absolutely prioritizes sound, resulting in a uniquely sonic horror experience. Now, we've certainly had other horror movies with excellent sound design, like the A Quiet Place movies, but Undertone incorporates its sound design a little differently. It's not about being quiet or even the contrast between soft and loud. It's about sensory focus. Podcasts are an auditory medium, and this film uses that to great effect. When Evie puts her headphones on, everything else gets shut out. The ticking clock, the ambient noise of the room. She becomes auditorially separated from the real world, which is an idea that gets played with as the paranormal podcast investigation begins to seemingly bleed over into her real life. With all of the other sounds shut out, the sonic focus is placed on the podcast, and specifically the 10 mysterious audio files. Like Evie and Justin, we strain to decipher what's happening and being said in these files. But there's a nagging feeling of dread that comes along with that. Not just about what disturbing things we might hear in the files, but also about the equally disturbing things Evie might not be hearing in the darkness of her house, while lost in the sonic isolation of her headphones. This is a film that's very effective at establishing and then heightening tension through quiet or even completely silent moments. And then, when the unsettling, creepy cacophony finally builds, the audience is forced to stay immersed in the experience. There's no eye-closing escape like you might have with a more visually based horror film. And so, interestingly, Undertone might very well be a movie that's scarier to watch at home than it is in the theater. Because even if you pause or mute it to try to get some sort of reprieve, your ears will still be straining to hear something creepy in your own home. Now, I got the theatrical viewing experience with this film. I saw it at Sundance this year, but it had already premiered at Fantasia Fest in 2025, so even during the festival circuit, we were still faced with a good deal of hype and excitement for this movie. I thought it sounded like a great concept, but I will say that I was still a little wary after having been burned by another podcast-centric horror film at Sundance in 2025, Didn't Die. But, like its all lowercase stylization, Undertone is a surprisingly understated film. It's got a very small, contained, slow burn story. In some ways, its simplistic staging and structure almost makes it feel like it's based on a play, at least until we reach the climax. In fact, given its prioritization of sound, you could almost imagine this like an old radio play, the kind of thing that would have terrified listeners in the 40s or 50s. I mean, podcasts kind of are the radio plays of our era, after all. This film shows a lot of potential when it comes to the podcast and Evie's real life paranormally bleeding together. However, it's the actual execution of this story concept that will be where this film may lose people. This is a slow burn. The pace is at a crawl for much of the film, and it does get pretty repetitive as Evie and Justin slowly make their way through the audio files. 10 may have been about 5 too many in this particular case. It also doesn't help that these characters aren't the most convincing or efficient podcast hosts. I mean, seriously, who records their supposedly weekly podcast in 20-minute snippets across multiple 3 a.m. sessions? In an almost entirely dark house, no less. So the character work isn't the best, nor the most empathy-garnering, but if the unsettling nursery rhyme mystery of the audio files manages to get its hooks into you, this film should be able to keep you sufficiently invested, regardless of any of its other shortcomings. Unfortunately, Undertone is the kind of movie where all of the hype surrounding it actually hurts it. When A24 swoops in and snaps up a little directorial debut that somebody shot in their childhood home with basically a single actor, and then incessantly hypes it up with scariest film of the year hyperbole, you're bound to see a lot of disappointed audience members. So, it's imperative that you, a prospective viewer, don't blindly fall for the hype. Not because it's bad or because it's not scary. It may very well be the scariest movie of the year for you, but it could just as easily be the most underwhelming and boring for you if you go in with that kind of hyperbolic mindset. Horror fans will likely be familiar with the controversial divisiveness of Skinamarink back in 2022, with some viewers being unnerved to the point of insomnia and just as many struggling to stay awake through the boredom. Undertone isn't quite as extreme with its experimental nothingness, but will likely still be nearly as polarizing, both within and without the horror community. It's a movie you'd do best to make your own mind up about. It's a precisely crafted film, and one that often makes more effective use of its silence and negative spaces than it does its more traditional components. It's certainly not a big thrills kind of horror film, but it's still one with enough creepy atmosphere and thought-provoking ambiguity to potentially satisfy horror fans. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro is absolutely the sound design. Sound is this film's priority, and like any horror film, it goes a long way in helping to create and maintain tension. But rather than just providing eerie background music and making jump scares more startling, it's actually incorporated into the podcast-centric story. When Evie's headphones go on, we're brought into the world of her paranormal podcast investigation. This creates a very unsettling soundscape of backwards demonic speech and baby cries, but it also enhances tension by leaving us worried about the real-world sounds she might be missing while wearing the headphones. The sound design here really adds to the overall sensory experience of the film, and prevents you from escaping the unease by just closing your eyes. Pro number 2 is the ambiguity. So I'll admit that this is something I tend not to like in most films. I'm somebody who likes answers and intention, so when a movie gets too ambiguous, it tends to irritate me. Undertone leaves certain things just open enough for interpretation, especially as you approach the end of the film. I'm not going to dive too deep into this because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but aspects of the final 20 minutes or so, regarding both Evie's experiences and her mother, allow for a number of different interpretation possibilities. And I think this actually benefits this type of film, because it allows audiences to all be satisfied with the same ending, just for different reasons. On the con side, the biggest issue is the slow burn story. Well, with putting ambiguity on the pro side and this on the cons, it kind of feels like opposite day. I love a good slow burn film, as long as it consistently smolders and then eventually satisfyingly catches. Unfortunately, this film struggles in both regards. This is a very sparsely plotted film, and it doesn't have all that much by way of character either. So it's very dependent on its atmosphere and the paranormal investigation at the heart of the story. The mystery of the audio files is just about all the story has to keep the audience invested, but it's unnecessarily drawn out with very little plot progression for much of the movie. Honestly, 5 files probably would have been more than enough. The climax is fun, and is certainly the most exciting part of the film, but I think some audience members will be underwhelmed, and not find it a worthwhile payoff after so much time spent listening to characters researching nursery rhymes. Speaking of which, con number 2 is the characters. They are pretty frustrating, and not even just in the typical horror movie ways. Yes, the main character makes some dumb decisions and goes off to investigate sounds in the dark, but the characters also just feel slightly off somehow. There's something so forced about the emotions and situations they find themselves in. It feels like the characters constantly keep us at arm's length, rather than drawing us in and garnering any empathy. And on top of that, there's this frustrating unbelievability and oddness to the podcast. The fact that they only record for 20 minutes at a time, that the bulk of their show is seemingly just reading aloud information they found online, even their awkward chemistry and Justin's strange tone throughout the film. I do think there's a possible plot interpretation that could be used to explain these things away, but when viewed as presented at least, it just feels off and constantly threatens to pull you out of the story. Before I give you my rating or recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Undertone or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're on the market for any of these movies or anything else. I'm gonna give Undertone 3.5 out of 5 paws, though right now at least this is a low 3.5 for me. This film is a slow burn sonic horror experience. It has a fairly sparse story, and the characters are nothing to write home about, but the effective sound design and unsettling atmosphere managed to carry this one right through its ambiguous, open-to-interpretation climax. I would recommend Undertone to horror fans who prioritize slow burn vibes over complex stories or classic scares. This is a slow movie, and could even be classified as dull if you're unable to get invested in the paranormal audiophile mystery. Your mileage may vary when it comes to scares here. Some people will be terrified by the unsettling supernatural elements, while other people will be left bored and rolling their eyes. It'll be divisive regardless, but try not to be swayed by the scariest movie of the year hyperbole, because you may find yourself very underwhelmed if you go in with that kind of mindset. That said, you should still absolutely give this film a shot if you're a horror fan, or anybody who appreciates atmosphere-setting craft. If you liked Undertone, I would recommend Sinister. This is another story about a creative being drawn into a sinister mystery that they can't resist investigating. Rather than a podcaster with audio files, Ethan Hawke plays a writer who stumbles across an unsettling snuff film that may have supernatural implications tied to the house he's living in. If you want another unsettling film, you might want to check out It Doesn't Get Any Better Than This. This tense found footage documentary deftly blurs the line between reality and fiction after a couple buy an abandoned duplex to shoot a horror movie, only to uncover the location's bizarre supernatural hold over the town. And if you're in the mood for even more creepiness, you should watch Paranormal Activity. This found footage film is essentially the video version of Undertone's audio files, focusing on a couple's nightly self-recordings after being disturbed by unsettling and inexplicable nighttime phenomena. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Undertone? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite horror movie that prioritizes sound? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.